Hello there, I'm Tanya Khazanov, and you are listening to Human and Holy. Before we get started with today's episode, I just want to mention, if you are on the East Coast, this Sunday, we are coming for a live Human and Holy podcast recording at the Manchester in Woodmere, New York, and I am so excited to meet you all. It's a couple days away, Sunday, November 2nd, 7:30 p.m. I have all the information in the show notes. You can RSVP at our Eventbrite. I will be in conversation with Rebbitzin Miriam Rubenstein, who is a Rebbitzin at Eish Kodesh, which, if you're familiar, is Rabbi Moshe Weinberger Shul in Woodmere, New York. She is also the host and teacher of popular chaburas on the subjects of bitachon. We are going to be having a really special conversation about trust, Torah, mentorship, connection, and the needs of women in their Judaism. I'm so excited for this. If you can't join us live, we will be airing that conversation on the podcast soon, but I would love to meet you, maybe give you some Human and Holy swag, some good, meaningful thing to take home with you. And it's just, there's nothing like gathering in one room and being able to talk to each other. We'll have a conversation, we'll do some crowd conversation and some audience questions, and it's going to be a really beautiful night. So link is in the show notes. Would love to see you there in Woodmere, New York. Let's get started with today's episode. Today, we're going to be exploring Parshas Lech Lecha, or really, more accurately, the first sentence, the first phrase, the first verse of Parshas Lech Lecha, where Avraham is sent out in this call to the wilderness, call to the unknown, this call to follow God from his birthplace, from the land that he knows, and to follow God to the land that he will be shown. Just this phrase alone, this phrase of Lech Lecha, of go, has always felt really personally meaningful to me. I have an art piece in my home in a hallway which says Lech Lecha. And to me, it's the story of every person's individual journey. All of us start out one place and are called by unexpected turns of our lives, are called by God to set out on an unknown journey, to discover who we are meant to be, who we are meant to become, and how we are intended to serve the world, which land we will settle in, what job we will do, what person we will marry, where we will be called by God to show up and transform the world. And of course, every single parsha in the Torah holds enormous relevant meaning to our individual lives. I find that there is something about the first parshios of the Torah that just seems so instructive in the most foundational ways to our individual paths and lives. Bereshis, the creation of the world. What does it look like for us to be creators, co-creators of reality? Why were we born? What is our purpose? Noach. What does it mean to exist before and after a flood? What does it mean to enter into a teva? What can be our teva, our place of refuge from the floods of our lives? How can we rebuild after things are washed away within our own lives and worlds? And now Lech Lecha, Avraham being called from his home, from his comfort zone, from the place that he was born, and called to follow God out into the unknown. There are so many incredible commentaries on this pasuk alone, on this first verse of this week's parsha, which really highlights enormous lessons for each of our own individual journeys and our abilities to remake ourselves and to step out into the unknown with faith and to trust that we are being called to something by God. Today, we're going to be exploring a Sfas Emes, an Orach Chaim, a talk from the Lubavitcher Rebbe, a beautiful piece of Chassidus from the Rebbe Rashab, Rabbi Shalom Dovber, as well as something from Reb Nassan of Breslov, the foremost student of Rabbi Nachman. Each of these bring out a different, rich lesson that we can each learn from Avraham in his call to the unknown. Let's begin by reading this verse inside in its original in the Torah. Vayomer Hashem al Avram, Lech Lecha, me'artzecha, u'mimoladetecha, u'mibeis avicha, el haaretz asher arecha. God said to Avram, go forth from your land, from your birthplace, and from your father's house, to the land that I will show you. And it continues, I will make of you a great nation, and I will bless you. I will make your name great, and you shall be a blessing. The Orach Chaim asks what I would consider a very natural question on this phrase. Why do we say Avram would be leaving his land, his birthplace, and the house of our fathers? It seems like one of those would suffice, or one overarching concept that encompasses every single element of his leaving. And the Orach Chaim says that we are listing his departure from that which was easiest to that which was the hardest. It was easiest to leave his land, harder to leave his birthplace, and even harder to leave his father's home. And even more than that, God wanted to highlight every single detail of his departure, to recognize the courage that it took for every step, for every additional element of the journey and the process, so that Avraham could be blessed, as we see in the following verse, for every leg of the journey. This is something that many of us experience in our lives. All of us are on this journey of life, and the word journey is probably the most overused word of the century, but it really is. The journey and the process of being a human being is that setting out that we each do. And it is very easy to summarize our own processes by these giant landmarks and to feel repetitive, even within our own selves, when acknowledging every deeper level of departure that we took from our place of origin towards the land that God is showing us. And we'll talk a little bit more about what that means. But we see beautifully in this Orach Chaim that every single leg of the process and the journey is accounted for. Every single one of those moments and steps and acts of courage are sources of blessing to us, are acts of trust and acts of courage that God is recognizing and seeing in our journeys, as God did for Avraham in his journey outwards. He said, I see you. I'm asking you to go from your land, from your birthplace, from the house of your father. I won't collapse all of those into one, because I know the enormous strength it takes for every single one of those departures. What does it mean to be called into this unknown path and this journey of life? Does it always literally mean leaving our homes, leaving our birthplace, journeying by foot elsewhere? There are many shapes and forms that this journey could take on. And there was one that I saw from the Sfas Emes that touched me in a deep way, which highlighted the meaning of this process, this meaning of this call from Hashem into the unknown, as a call to openness, as a call to curiosity, as a call to being willing to see and hear all that is being presented to you in the world, a call to being an open-hearted presence in the world. And I want to read it to you inside in English. Simply because it is in the life of the land of Israel to abandon all senses and desires only to the will of God, as it says, go from your land. That is, to discard all external attachments in order to see the will of God. And then his will be revealed to man. And the rule is that it should always be a person's desire to only hear and receive what he does not know, that there is no limit to his knowledge, and that he should always be more and more empty. And this is the meaning of hear and see, that one should always be in the life of seeing, looking, and listening to receive what is above his attainment by nullifying his intellect and knowledge now. I think we all know that the most enormous wisdom you see in those that choose to constantly live in this state of not knowing, of curiosity, of wanting to learn more. This invitation for God, for us to step into the unknown, is an invitation to live our lives with that openness and that curiosity as if we don't already know everything there is to know, but to truly live with that openness, with that level of attention, that our call by Hashem out into the world is a call to release our attachments to everything we have already known and to enter into this truly open, fluid state of seeing, hearing, and receiving from the world, of being able to be attuned to where Hashem is sending us within the unknown, to be able to approach others with this lens of curiosity and to want to listen and learn more. And I think that the suggestion in this commentary is that when we are in that unknown state, we often feel that we are not being guided by God. It's when we are within the certainty that we often feel that we are being guided and led. But there's the famous quote from Rabbi Jonathan Sachs that I loved, and probably the first phrase I heard from him when I was very young. Faith is not certainty. Faith is the courage to live with uncertainty. And sometimes when we find ourselves in those very certain, rock-solid spots in our lives, not to say that we don't have moral conviction, but when we find ourselves in those very certain places, we can become rigid and immobile. When we find ourselves within the uncertainty, when we find ourselves not knowing what the next move is, when we find ourselves opened up to the world in ways that we are truly learning again, where we are truly curious again, that is when we begin to be led by God. The call from Hashem to enter into the unknown is the call to live a life of open-heartedness to everything that is being presented to us. It is the call, in the language of the Sfas Emes, to always be more and more empty, to live a life of seeing, looking, and listening to receive. To be more and more empty, I can't even describe how that lights something in me, that phrase, to be more and more empty. The longer I'm alive, the further I am on this process and journey of life, that emptiness calls to me in such a deep way. That presence and that curiosity and that openness to me feels like the only thing that is being invited of me in this world, to be more and more empty. Emptiness to me is humility and wonderment in the face of an endless universe. It's a knowing that I know nothing. And in that knowing, there is suddenly the curiosity to learn. There's suddenly the desire to receive. There is suddenly a heightened sense of awareness and attention placed to everything that Hashem sends across my path. This to me is the call to adventure, to empty ourselves, to open ourselves, to know that uncertainty is not a problem to be fixed, but an experience to truly be leaned into. And that in that uncertainty, something gets sparked within us, a heightened sense of curiosity and attunement and attention played to everything that Hashem is sending in our path. Lech Lecha. May we be more and more empty. May we live a life of seeing and hearing and receiving everything that Hashem is sending our way. And may we know that when we are living within the unknown, it is not that we are not being led, but it's precisely when we feel that we are in the unknown, that we are uncertain, that we become truly open to being led by Hashem. And I know for many of us that uncertainty can be a very uncomfortable place to be. It heightens our sense of lack of control over our own lives. And there's this very interesting duality that we see over and over again within our Judaism, which is this call to complete human agency, this call to create the world, this call to responsibility for the future and path of reality. And at the same time, this complete surrender to God and this recognition that we are being called to the land that God will show us. So there's the combination of our own uncertainty and not knowing and openness to where God is leading us and our own human agency. And this is put very beautifully in a Hasidic teaching from Rabbi Shalom Dov Brev Lubavitch, the Rebbe Rashab. And these are his words. By the decree of divine providence, man wanders about in his travels to those places where the sparks that are to be extracted by him await their redemption. The cause of all causes, meaning God, brings about the many circumstances and pretexts that bring a person to those places where his personal mission in life is to be acted out. You are being led. Don't fight the places where God is bringing you. Hashem causes every single detail of our lives and journeys and processes because they're unique spots that each of us have to reveal within the world. And it takes enormous courage not to resist the land that God is showing us. It takes enormous courage not to want to control where the sparks that we have to be revealed are. Naturally, we want to control exactly where our mission is. But the human agency lies in revealing the mission where God is showing us, to be in dialogue with God, to recognize that Hashem is bringing us to a place, and this is the place where our soul is destined to awaken something divine and godly. So although we may be in the unknown and we don't know exactly what the next step is, the circumstances, the details of the circumstances of our lives, of our characters, of our upbringings are signals and clues to us of where our work in this world is and where our mission is and how we can contribute and show up to the world. And with this belief that each of us are sent on very individual paths in order to highlight and awaken very individual and particular calls and are being truly led in very detailed ways by Hashem, there's also the understanding that part of this path is an invitation to personal transformation. It's not just about being taken on the current of our own characters in order to respond to the places, the physical places and circumstances that God shows us, but it's also an invitation to leave our internal land, our internal birthplace, our internal father's land. And there's two beautiful teachings that I want to show that highlights the different metaphors that we could apply to this land, birthplace, and father's home that Avraham is being asked to leave and that we too are being invited to leave over the course of our lives. According to Reb Nassan of Breslov, the land refers to the blinding attitudes of society. The birthplace refers to the spiritual deficiencies of your own origin story. And your father's home refers to the mistaken beliefs of your family that nurtured you. And we underestimate how much we can remake ourselves, how much we can extricate ourselves from the negative influences of our culture, of our origin story, of our familial upbringing, how much we can truly separate and distance ourselves from spiritual deficiencies or messaging that may be harming our ability to connect to God as adults or wherever we are on the journey of life. And this invitation, this call to consciously extricate ourselves from the negative messages of our past, to recognize that inherent within the human existence is this ability to so completely remake ourselves, to really separate our own experiences from the negative impacts that our society, our culture, and our upbringing may have had on us. And even deeper than this, in a talk of the Lubavitcher Rebbe, he highlights how these three places that Avraham left, these three departures, highlight three inner transformations that we could experience, not just distancing ourselves from our cultures or negative beliefs from our families or whatever else is holding us back, but also being able to literally transform who we are as people, to transform our will, to transform our emotional world, to transform our intellectual world and our wisdom. The word eretz, land, has the same root letters as the word ratzon, will. And so the invitation to leave our land is an invitation to transcend our own wills, to transform our desires. According to the Rebbe, our birthplace refers to our natural innate tendencies and emotional traits, and the land of your father refers to our intellectual world. Chachma, which is wisdom, is often referred to as the father. Your father's house refers to your intellectual capabilities and this ability to remake who you are intellectually. And bringing this back to this Sfas Emes, this call to be more and more empty, to trust that not only are we so empowered as human beings to leave our origin stories and to create a new and brighter future for ourselves, for our families, and for the world, but we also have power to transform our own inner worlds. That when we struggle emotionally, intellectually, or with will and our own desires and innate tendencies, we have the ability to remake that in such a profound way that we become completely changed. It is as though we have physically left it. And this possibility for internal transformation is one of the most powerful Hasidic ideas to me, which obviously shows up in many different ways, with many different examples, with many different metaphors. But this ability to recognize that my mind is something that I can choose to fill with new ideas, that I can develop a wisdom intellectually that can replace old ideas that may have been less true, that I can use that intellectual understanding to transform my emotional world, that the ideas that I study and integrate can transform the way that I feel about myself, about my life, about the world, about my circumstances, about my place. And that emotional transformation can also lead to a complete transformation of my own desire, my own personal sense of will. When the human being truly deeply wants God, this is the transformation taking place. When the human being's own ideas and own mind is filled with the wisdom of the Torah, this is this transformation that we're describing. When the human being feels an enormous emotional pull for their Judaism, for connection with God, this is a Lech Lecha. This is the transformation of our own inner worlds, where we are being called by God, not just to go somewhere there, but to go somewhere here and to transform what is the landscape of our own inner worlds and our own interiority. And I think that there's such an empowerment here for me around this real ability and empowerment to transform who we are as people and to remake ourselves and to recreate ourselves, and not to be limited either, as Reb Nosson says, by our origin stories, by our culture, by negative messages of our youth, but also not to be limited by our own negative character traits, by our own lack of development in our intellect and emotion and desire and will, to be really channeled for something that's more transcendent and loftier. You obviously see this development and this maturation over the course of your youth, and as your mind develops and you're able to interact with new ideas, where you're able to replace certain outdated views and visions of the world in ways that are a huge improvement for your own experience of life. This is something that we get to actively do and shape, not just through the natural maturity process of throughout adulthood, but also through interacting with Jewish ideas, with Torah, with Chassidus, with the wisdom of God that allows us to interact with ideas that will transform our own inner worlds. This call to the unknown is also a call to study in a way that will transform who we are internally. And in this process of transformation, of responding to the call of the unknown, of emptying ourselves, to being able to pay deeper attention to the world and to live with more openness to the ideas of God and to the circumstances of our lives and the ways that they are guiding us. The Rebbe writes in a different Sikha that we ourselves will be revealed. The wording of the pasuk, the wording of the verse, Ela aretz asher arecha, the land that I will show you. Asher arecha, that I will show you, could also be translated as I will reveal you. And the words Lech Lecha, go forth, could also be translated as go to you. Because in this travel, in this journey, in this going out of ourselves, God is saying, Asher arecha, I will reveal you to yourself. I will show you who you are. I will bring you further inward into an intimacy with yourself. It is precisely in your openness to the world that you will discover who you are. It is in rediscovering wonderment, adventure, and trust in God, and being willing to thrust yourself into the unknown, that you will begin then, in that emptiness, to know yourself, and to begin to recognize who you are truly. Lech Lecha means go to yourself, to your essence, to the source of your soul. And in an age when all of us crave self-awareness, intimacy with our own selves, the ability to really enjoy and know who we are, there can often be a fear that following God or answering God's call or surrendering in this way will lead us away from ourselves, will ask us to compromise our own knowing, and will instead ask us to be completely transcendent. But in truth, this call to the unknown, this call by God to go on our own journeys, is only going to take us more deeply inward. Whenever we are being called outward by God, we are also being called inward. And something that I've seen over and over again is that those who give in really heightened ways also support themselves and root themselves in heightened ways. These are my lessons from Parshas Lech Lecha. 1, you are being led. Precisely when you think that you can't see Hashem, God is unveiling something for you, is revealing something for you. God is sending you, showing you towards the land that you are promised. 2, we underestimate how much we can remake ourselves, how much we can build our vision for our own futures, how much we can leave the land of our birthplace, the negative messaging of our culture and upbringings, and truly fashion a vision for the world and our own lives that is not tethered or limited by our pasts. And even more deeply than that, not only can we leave those messagings outside of us, we can also transform our own natures and characters. We can transform our wisdom. We can transform our hearts. We can transform our desires. We underestimate how deeply we can recreate who we are, what motivates us, what guides us, what we think about, what we care about, what we feel. There's an incredible ability in the human being to naturally and organically transform ourselves. And this to me is one of the greatest teachings and messages of this parsha. 3rd lesson, every detail in our path is a source of blessing. There's no juncture that is a mistake. There's no fall, there's no fail, there's no pivot, there's no spot, there's no tiny moment of leaping, of courage that goes unnoticed by God. Every single one of those little moments and junctures are leading us in a certain direction. Steve Jobs famously said that you could only put the dots of your life together in retrospect, but I find it so comforting that those dots are being guided by God, that yes, and only in retrospect can we put those dots together, but we can trust in those moments when things feel like a deviation from the path, that they're actually leading us somewhere, that every single detail of this path and journey is being accounted for by God, noticed by God, and is leading us to more and more blessing. 4th lesson from Lech Lecha, from the Sfas Emes. God's call to follow him out of what we have always known is a call to a life of looking, a life of seeing, a life of receiving. The life of divine service is a call to a life of wonderment, of openness, of deeper attention to the world. This is the greatest call to adventure to me, the call to open-hearted presence with the world. And 5th and final lesson, it is not just the path that will be revealed, it is you that will be revealed. Life's journeys reveal who we are. We develop an intimacy with ourselves in the process of connecting to God. Through following the paths that Hashem invites us to, we discover who we are. The call outward is always a call inward too. Lech Lecha, go forth. Go to yourself, go into the unknown, go with trust, go with open-heartedness, go with presence, go with the knowing that you can transform who you are, that you are not limited by your past, that you are bolstered and led forward by a vision so much grander than one you could ever hope for in your life. God is calling you to the unknown because he has blessings in store for you that are so much greater than what you could imagine for yourself. God is calling you to the unknown, knowing that you can recreate yourself, that you have the ultimate human agency, that in the openness, that in being led, you're going to become something that is so much greater than what you have ever been. God is calling each of us out of our comfort zones, out of our birthplace, out of our limiting mindsets, out of the wisdom that we have known, to something that is so much more expansive, that is so much more open, that just asks us to show up fully with openness, with presence, with wonder to the land that God is showing us, to the path that Hashem is setting for us, to the path that we could never set on our own. May we all have the courage to remain open, to become more and more empty, to always be listening, to always be seeing, to always be receiving, to trusting that we can be completely and totally existentially transformed, and that this world, through that, can also be so completely transformed.